you know, we got the CEO, Clinkscales, Revolt TV, and the moderator for this evening is Israel. And make some noise for Israel, y'all.
There you go. All right, folks, give it up for Mr. Keith Clinkscales.
Was an artist relevant marks.
That's why I told you she might have been like so high.
Revolt is advancing the culture.
In the 80s, when you were starting a media company, your competition were giants. So if you don't mind sharing a little bit about the mindset, and also if you don't mind some of those struggles early on, because in many ways that was the foundation to your illustrious career in media.
Yeah, the biggest thing was trying to find a lane. You know, I went to Spike Lee did a movie called Do the Right Thing in New York. Right? He had a big party, and I remember going to the party, but I couldn't get in because I wasn't cool. I was nobody. I was working for a bank, and I was like a financial analyst. But I wanted to be there so bad. I just stood outside with a whole bunch of other people that were just like me, and we were all watching all the celebrities of the day go into this party, and you know, after the whole movie and things like that. And I knew I wanted to be a part of it. Different things had been happening in New York, racial situations. Bernard Getz was a situation where this guy opened fire on these brothers on a subway train, wounding one severely. The Howard Beach situation. Two guys, black guy's car breaks down in Howard Beach, Queens. They get chased onto the highway. Guy gets hit by the car. And, you know, and all the media that talked about these things were basically like, they were like, what were they doing there? Why were they on the train? Did they threaten? You know, they were dressed poorly, and all these different things were coming up in the media. Now, as a young black guy that rides the train and plays basketball sometimes, not always suited, you know, that was a concern. Media, you know, media was the thing that I felt was my lane in the hip hop. What I learned from Spike and Do the Right Thing and She's Gotta Have It is that hip hop is a mentality, not just the music itself, you know. It is a mentality to make something out of nothing. You know, when guys in the Bronx were popping the plates off of the light switches to go ahead and jack in so they can play their turntables, that's not something that's actually encouraged by the NYPD, you know, but they did it anyway. So what I learned was that there needs to be some media, and what fueled my mindset at the time was Boogie Down Productions, Public Enemy, Poor Righteous Teachers, all those different things. So those were the things that were X-Clan. They were all in my head when I'm sitting here trying to deliver these messages, because messages were important. Now, making a magazine back then, I had I think I had a Mac 512K. You know, my phone right now is about, you know, 100 times more powerful than the computer I used to put the first, you know, the first magazine together. And I made every mistake known, every mistake ever made in publishing, I made. These were the worst magazines ever. So this is the other thing. Here's the other thing too about doing something. Nobody starts out dope. Nobody starts out fly. You gotta put work out, have it beat up, have it thrown back in your face, and keep going. You know, nobody. If you look at some of the early magazines that I did, you would be appalled that I even have a communications position. You would be appalled, right? Spellings, grammaticals, English was a second language, I didn't know where it was, you know. But I kept going, and that's the whole thing. You got to keep going. So you learn about advertising, and you learn the whole game. You cannot be good at anything without knowing the whole game. You can't master the whole game, but you got to know production. You got to know marketing. You got to know promotion. You got to know where the rising things are coming from now, and you got to know how to work them.
Awesome. And if you don't mind sharing a little bit about some of those early lessons that you learned as an entrepreneur in the media space, that you were able to apply when you moved to the next level, which was with Vibe Magazine?
I think the paying attention to cost. You can never. You always want to do the fun things. Everybody always wants to do the party. They always want to do the, the fun stuff. It's always the hard stuff that people don't want to pay attention to. That takes the most time. It's the least amount of fun. But if you do it the right way, you can save yourself a lot of money and a lot of frustration. So find ways to really understand what you're doing. Find ways. If you're trying to do music, don't think about music in terms of what sells. Think about things that really touch you, things that you're willing to put that extra hour in, the extra 2 hours in, the extra 3 hours in, because that's the only thing that's going to work. It doesn't matter what it is, going for it, like, oh, the trap is hot, I'm going to talk about my trap from Trumbull, Connecticut. There was no traps in Trumbull, Connecticut. So I couldn't do, there's no traps for me. If I was going to do that, you got to come with something else totally different. And that's what you got to see, that inspiration in the work. That is, I think, passion, but passion applied. Not just passion for the sake, because everybody says, oh, I work hard, I do this. You got to make sure that it's passion applied to something that you can really manifest.
Indeed, and I would imagine that is a common trait with entrepreneurs, is not only having that passion, but also having the vision to get to that end goal.
Well, Malcolm Gladwell, he did a book that spoke about 10,000 hours, like to be good at anything.
Outliers.
10,000 hours, And, I think Malcolm is correct. When I got to watch Quincy make an album called the Juke Joint, I think it was the album. It was one of his albums came out later on. The amount of time he spent, bringing artists in and working with them and doing different things. This is for just for a 16 bar thing. I mean, it wasn't even that serious. But to him, it was extremely serious. Watching, thank God for Instagram. When you get to watch Puff in the studio, that's not some Instagram hype that he shot just for Instagram. That's what's going on. That's where he is, and he's in there hour after hour after hour with a crew of folks that are there working and tweaking and bringing it back, and it happens all the time, and people feed off that. People feed off of your passion for these things. The culture is big enough to reward everybody. You don't have to, there's not much you have to really hate on. You can learn a lot from paying attention to things that you don't understand.
Is there, you think, a disconnect between what is happening in front of us, whether it be a discussion, whether it be, word of mouth promotion, whether it be a live performance, and what we're seeing online, because there really are no barriers. It doesn't really take much. You just need to turn your computer on. You don't have to get in front of people. You don't have to leave your house to get whatever it is that you're trying to get out. And it seems like there's so much of that without the substance, without the people, without that foundation.
Well, I'm going to say this, but I'm going to say it very carefully. Technology is awesome, but technology can also hide things. Like if I get auto-tune, I can be dope with auto-tune. There's different ways I can go ahead and flip things. And I remember in the days when producers used to have to be able to work a 48-track board and be able to work the whole studio. Now producers sitting at the very same studio with the 48 channels and things like that, and they're on their laptop, Pro Tools, or whatever it is, and the whole game has changed. Now, that doesn't mean that those producers are not good. It means the barriers to entry to go ahead and for people to come in and be able to produce things has changed. So when the barriers to entry lower, the amount of things that are not as good, increase, and that means the bar for artists today is higher than it's ever been at any time in history by a magnitude of several hundred. So if you were a good singer 10 years ago, you are nobody now, If you're a great singer 10 years ago and you're right now, it's hard to break through. So not because you're not talented, not because you haven't done the work, but because there's so many different ways to get there, and fewer and fewer and fewer places to reach people. Does that mean you give up on it? Absolutely not. It means that you've got to understand the game. Understand people used to release albums. Why? You know, why? You know, get a hot joint, get something hot and get it going. You know, when you get to a certain place as an artist, you know, when you have that brand and other things, then you can get into all these other things. But the opportunity to use the technology you have to get something going and make it go, that's where you got to be. If you're going to be an entrepreneur or an artist, you need to get very comfortable with the word no. You know, you've got to learn to embrace it. You've got to learn to love it and learn to make it as fuel. And every victory is not a victory, and every loss is not necessarily a loss. I've had times where things didn't work out for me. And, you know, Vanguard, you know, we had Savoy magazine, we had President Obama on before he was president, and, you know, Aaliyah and all these different artists on Honey. Honey was a wonderful publication. And we tried as we might, we couldn't make it work. We came into that right during the change from print to digital. And then we had, you know, the matter of coming out of 9/11 and all the other different things that really affected things, and you know, just didn't have the timing right. Many times in my career, I was always just a touch ahead, you know, and sometimes being a touch ahead works. Sometimes being a touch ahead is disastrous, you know. So timing, you know, sometimes timing works for you, sometimes it doesn't. I think the biggest lesson that I got from the bumps is, when you've had a setback, remember who picks up the phone when you call.
Amen.
Right? Now, when I was like president of Vibe, oh Keith, what up? You know, it's all good, you know. But when you're not, you know, your phone sometimes gets answered differently. You know, when you're running the division at ESPN and everybody, phone gets answered differently, you know. But it's the people who answer the phone for Keith, not for Keith running by or Keith doing this. Those are the people you want to remember, and those are the people you want to work and build through. Because when times get hard, that's how you go ahead and you plot your next move. I think the most important thing to have, and why conferences like this is so important, is because it's your walk around time. You got to think about, you know, you just don't do things to do them. You got to think about, here's why I want to do it, here's why I want to put this work in, here's what I want to do, and here's the path we're going to get there. Now, it might, you know, plans change and things happen, but you want to have a plan. You always want to have a plan. Stick to that.
Now you talked about people, and you know, there's this age-old saying, you know, don't go into business with close friends, don't go into business with family, maybe don't go into business with your homeboys from around the block. And we've seen many instances, even today, you turn on TMZ and see something go wrong because somebody put somebody that's a friend in charge of something and they drop the ball because they're not professional. If you don't mind talking a little bit about how do you decide on, you know, what people to work with? I mean, just because they're around you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best suited for those positions. And is it difficult to walk away from people, at least in a business context, that you might be personally close to?
So look, I'm a big believer in crew, and I think you got to have that. But at the same time, you know, you got a responsibility, you know, and families depend on you. Mortgages and rents get paid on you. Health benefits get paid on you. You know, when you're up in the cities, especially, but all over the country. I mean, things are expensive, you know. And you've got a job to do. So the most important thing to do is to return. When you're in a corporation or a business, your primary goal is the value of the corporation. When you are in my position, when you're a CEO, my primary goal is how do I make the business worth more? You know, because my largest shareholder, Sean Combs, don't play that. You know, I mean, are we cool? Yes, we're cool. But if I go ahead and the decisions I'm making are costing him money, that's just not going to work. That's not acceptable. And that's just something, that's something I accept when I take the position. It's not like, oh, well, this didn't happen, or if he had done this. No, it's on you. And everybody who is in a position, you're in a position of responsibility, whether you're the artist, the manager, the person that's doing PR or doing events. Everybody has a role to maximize that role. If you don't do that, especially in these digital streets,
right.
It's real. You can get done because the hustle has to be there. So you got to kind of pay attention to the people you're working with, the crew that you're with. Look, all the things that I've been able to do, parties have been dope. I've been to great parties, right? But the parties, I swear to you, are less than 0.5%, maybe even 0.1% of the time that you're spending. It's just all the rest of it is work. Now it's not drudgery, it's not awful bad work. So I'm not even going to try to make it that. It's a lot of fun, but it's still work. The people that are there for the parties, the people that are there for the hang, and oh, here's this and like that, you want to find them early and root them out. You also want to look at people's eyes. Early on in my days, when we talked about, we were at Vibe, we're going to go after Rolling Stone, I could look right in people's eyes and see if they believed it or not, right? And it wasn't a long decision process I had. If I looked at you and I felt like, you know what, you're not for this, you were done, When I was speaking with Sean Combs about building this network, this is a man who has had some of the greatest business, not music, some of the greatest business triumphs in history. Not black business triumphs, business triumphs, The story of Ciroc, which could be a whole nother seminar, right? The story of Ciroc is one of the greatest business stories ever in the history of American commerce, world commerce. Nothing is bigger than what happened with Ciroc, that he handled with his crew. So this is a guy who knows business. So the ability to go ahead and make sure that the same kind of tenacity that he brings to something, you bring it to everything, you bring it to everything. Or don't come work here, because there's jobs other places. There's always jobs. Anybody who is in this stuff cannot be in it for a job. You've got to be in it for the love. You've got to be in it because this is what you want to do. Because jobs will root. If you're here for a job, you'll get rooted up. Because it's just what is required to be great. That's it.